I remember when I first read just the announcement that something like this happened, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, just as an accounting professional, I know firsthand how difficult it is on clients when a resource that you're using for a client or the client themselves are using doesn't perform as hoped. When I read this, I thought to myself, man, that brings that experience to just a whole new level. Not only did it not perform as hoped, but it aggressively accentuated an experience that no one desires.
This episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by BQE Core. If you have niche clients that are architects, engineers, consultants, or lawyers, BQE Core is the app for them to best manage their firm, increase their staff productivity, and ultimately increase their profits. Even if you don't have those niche clients, Core is a great tool to use in your own accounting or bookkeeping firm as well. Core is an easy-to-use all-in-one platform for project management, but includes advanced functionality like budgets, labor cost, forecasting, contract analysis, and approval processes. Core also includes a standalone accounting module. Even though Core is an all-in-one platform, it still works nicely with other apps, offering you and your clients the maximum amount of flexibility. Core offers a full-function mobile app and recently launched a cutting-edge voice-based assistant for your smart speaker of choice. To learn even more about BQE Core, head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/core. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/CORE.
Welcome to the Cloud Accounting Podcast. I'm Blake Oliver.
I'm David Leary.
And I'm Will Lopez of Gusto.
So Will, when did that happen? We've known each other for quite a long time. I think I met you at one of the first conferences I ever went to. I think it was
I think so.
Maybe SleaterCon back in the day.
And I barely just met him at the last accounting salon. It was the first time ever.
Yeah, I think that was SleaterCon's last conference in Las Vegas, and that's where we officially met.
We met, we bonded there, and that was when you had your own firm in Florida called AdvisorFi, which I very much admired, and you were doing that for quite a long time. And then now you have moved to Denver, and what are you doing with Gusto these days?
Wait, you skipped the whole YouTube channel he had.
Well, yeah, that was quite. I mean, you were creating all these great videos for business owners, accountants, taking the crazy elaborately produced YouTube video concept and applying that to our profession. I think you were
it was an extreme hodgepodge of personas oozing out of my channel.
And it's still there, right? So if people want to go check it out, you've got that AdvisorFi YouTube channel there. But you're no longer a YouTube star, or I mean, maybe you're going to keep doing that. But you sold your firm,
right? And
now you are. What are you doing with Gusto?
And relocated as well, right? You moved?
Yeah, I relocated from South Florida. So born and raised in South Florida, by the way. So relocating anywhere is going to be my first time experience because I was born down in Hollywood, raised in the South Florida area, went to college there, got married there, had my family there, all life there. Recently took a leadership position with Gusto to help them lead the accountant community side to Gusto. So no regrets whatsoever. Absolutely love Gusto. Gusto was one of the few companies I thought to myself that if I ever had an opportunity to work with one of these pretty amazing fintech apps, I think Gusto would be it. So, it's I'd love to say, it's one of those once in a lifetime opportunities, if any, in a lifetime. So I just couldn't pass it up.
Awesome. Well, we're very lucky to have you on, given the ongoing drama with payroll and fraud. I'll look forward to getting your take on that.
Oh, yeah.
And we've got some other stories, of course. I want to assure our listeners, even though the last two episodes have been very focused on MyPayrollHR, we're going to have more than that in this episode. We're going to not dwell on that too much. But first, we have some reviews, right, David?
Yeah, we'll jump right in. So this review is 5 stars. It's from Melissa Wasgat. Amazing podcast. I listen through Spotify while I work. Excellent full coverage of everything accounting. Thank you so much.
David Shingler said 5 stars. I currently work at ADP in the small business market, and partnering with CPAs is the sole role I have here. So keeping up to date on the newest information and trends is key for being a valuable asset to the firms I work with. I love listening to Cloud Accounting to keep me updated on the industry, growth for firms, and anything I can obtain knowledge-wise to best partner with the CPAs I work with. Their podcast makes it easy to listen to and is extremely informative, especially for somebody who does not deal with the ins and outs that many CPAs deal with on a day-to-day basis. I highly recommend this to all accounting practices and anyone curious about the updates/trends within the CPA world. Thanks, David.
This is 5 stars from Trevor McCandless. Great podcast. Blake and David live accounting industry news and updates and share their insights in a way that I do not hear or read anywhere else. Keep up the good work.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And finally, the single best source for digestible news in the accounting world. As a partner advisor at Gusto, I speak with dozens of accounting and bookkeeping professionals from around the country weekly who are all asking how I'm keeping up with the latest tech and changes in the industry. The number one resource I recommend outside of the Gusto Partners blog is the Cloud Accounting Podcast. I listen weekly, and I'm able to oftentimes bring up relevant news and happenings with my partners to ensure they're maximizing their profits and offerings to their clients. The recent episode on the MyPayrollHR scandal was the best source of information I was able to find on the tragic situation because Blake and David put in the time research to provide us with a clear explanation on the situation as we know it. Thanks for keeping me and our partners at Gusto up to date. Matt Woodson. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Trevor, David, and Melissa for your reviews this week. And a reminder to our listeners, if you want to write a review, you can head over to our page on Apple Podcasts or on podchaser.com, as David said, and leave us a review, and we will read it on the air.
It's like a free commercial, right? ADP got a free commercial. Gusto got a free commercial. So Paychex or any of you other payroll providers that are out there, go write us a review.
Yeah.
Love to read it on the air.
Well, the Cloud Accounting Podcast is part of our toolkit over here. So that's how we stay up to date, right?
That's awesome. That's great to hear.
It's in the new hire manual.
Yeah, it should be. It should be officially.
Let's get on that.
Get on the news, yeah.
We got lots to talk about. Some updates on MyPayrollHR. And for those who are not familiar, we're talking about the $35 million payroll fraud, a small payroll processor in New York. At the beginning of this month, shortly after Labor Day, just up and shut down, went out of business, disappeared, leaving 4,000 employers, as many as 250,000 employees in the lurch. And for some of them, their payroll didn't process. And in fact, they ended up having negative account balances because of a whole mess that occurred with the payment processor, Cachet. And we've got an in-depth interview with the chief legal counsel for Cachet Financial Services. That was our most recent episode. So check that out for a full, almost like true crime episode about what happened with this fraud. You want to listen to episode 112 and then episode 114. Episode 114 is the interview. We're not going to go back into the whole thing of what happened. Let's just talk about the latest updates, David.
So since the last 2 days, there's a news article that Michael Mann has hired an attorney. And there was even a...
So he's alive.
He's alive.
He exists. Okay.
And the attorney made a statement. Where did we...
So this is Michael Koenig, now representing Michael Mann, the owner of the now closed MyPayrollHR and the parent company ValueWise Corp.
He's the guy who's been missing, along with the money. So I'll read the quote here. Almost 2 weeks ago, through me, Michael Mann contacted the U.S. Attorney's Office. Michael has since voluntarily and proactively met with and is cooperating with the U.S. Attorney's Office in order to fully and accurately address recent events. He will continue to do so, but will not be making any public statements.
So he's cooperating. We still don't know if he's in the country, but we know he's got an attorney and is cooperating with the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah, and he went on to reiterate that we affirmatively reached out to U.S. Attorney's Office before any law enforcement or regulatory agent came to him.
Okay, so that must have been then before the raid on his home. That was, a few days ago, right?
Yeah, or before Governor Cuomo announced that he was launching an investigation, et cetera, et cetera. So either A, it was guilt, right? Like, I made a big mistake. I shouldn't have done this. Or, like I said before, is he compromised? I don't know.
Another story, breaking news. 2 class action lawsuits have been filed against Cachet Financial Services, the third-party processor that handled payroll direct deposits for MyPayrollHR. A Los Angeles-based law firm filed a complaint on Thursday against Cachet in the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California, where Cachet is headquartered. And then another firm, a Las Vegas-based firm, filed in Nevada against Cachet and also named MyPayrollHR in that lawsuit. So this is, I think they're representing the employees as a class who reported having their direct deposits pulled back from their accounts when the money was missing from the settlement account. And Cachet really, they bungled that. I think we can all agree that that's not a complicated analysis, that causing the payrolls to go twice was a bit of a problem, and it caused some major issues for some of these employees. Like, people couldn't pay rent, they couldn't buy medication. All right, a big problem. So there may be more consequences to this, to Cachet and possibly the banks too, than MyPayrollHR, than just the missing money.
I get it, right? Like, if Cachet was able to possibly eat $26 million, the lawyers are probably like, hey, that means what's another $5 million to sue them for? Because they're probably not, nobody's gonna be able to sue MyPayrollHR because it's pretty clear that money's gone. Nobody has that money.
Well, but there is a frozen account with like $19 million in it.
I was going to say, is it really gone? I mean, because I read the same thing.
It may take a long time to figure out where it went, I guess, right? And we still, of course, don't know what Michael Mann intended to do with the money. Speculation. Like, if he hasn't fled the country with it, then maybe he was just trying to keep other businesses afloat by moving money around. I don't. It's strange. So we'll find out. So I'm really happy that we have Will on, because Will, being at Gusto as a connection to the accounting community, I want to learn from you. What is the insight from somebody inside a payroll company on the watching this happen? What is your takeaway from this? And then I've got some more follow-up questions as to, how do you ensure at Gusto that this doesn't happen?
Yeah, I remember when I first read the announcement that something like this happened, I was thinking to myself, I'm like, just as an accounting professional, I know firsthand how difficult it is on clients when a resource that you're using for a client, or the client themselves are using, doesn't perform as hoped. Right. Mm-hmm. And public accounting is riddled with those kind of experiences where some things work, some things don't, just in a very broad way. And when I read this, I thought to myself, man, that brings that experience to just a whole new level. Right. Yeah. Not only did it not perform as hoped, but it aggressively accentuated an experience that no one desires. So
like we've been talking a lot about the employers, the employees, but what about those accountants and bookkeepers who recommended MyPayrollHR to their clients, who partnered with them? Right now that it looks like they don't know what they're doing.
Or it kind of pins them in a light where they made a bad recommendation. Right? Or even look at the accounting professional. What processes do you have to make sure that the resources that you're recommending are good resources, or resources that have longevity to it, right? Obviously, at Gusto, one of our pillars, or our mission here, is obviously to create a world where work empowers a better life, and something like this does not empower a better life. So no doubt, it's a sad day in the land of accounting and business, and one of the pillars associated with our mission is peace of mind, right? So there's very little peace of mind going on here for those who are affected by like the MyPayrollHR situation. So
the way this happened, as it was explained to us by Wendy Slavkin at Cachet, is that somebody at MyPayrollHR messed with the payment file, or the batch file that was sent to Cachet, instructing them on how to move money around. So basically, an account number got changed in a file. So is that something that is an industry standard practice, where that's possible that any payroll service could be the victim of this? I mean, the other one was as well. There were two, actually, right? NatPay was also a victim of MyPayrollHR. How does it work at Gusto? Like, do you guys partner with a payment processor? What's the workflow for you? Is it the same? Is it different?
Yeah, because I think, to elaborate on that, that's what goes off in my head, is you have somebody like Gusto, or a modern SaaS application, right, is all based on APIs, making API calls to QuickBooks, making API calls to Xero, et cetera. And it's all, there's error controls and all that. But the ACH system sounds like it's still just like a text file.
Right.
How does Gusto bridge that world of, on the front end, on one end, we're this high-tech SaaS company. On the back end, we're kind of still dealing with technology that was designed in procedures from 1975.
Why should accountants trust Gusto?
Yeah, no. So great question. So obviously Gusto has dedicated risk teams that oversee all this kind of activity. In general, though, Gusto's payment systems, they're designed in such a way so that if any changes happen to a bank account that's initiated, then that change is screened for either fraudulent or suspicious behavior using kind of like our proprietary machine learning model systems that we have internally. So any transactions that are kind of flagged as suspicious are then blocked until our dedicated risk team manually reviews them and approves the transaction. So on top of all that, though, our payment systems not only automatically notifies the customer every single time, anytime a change is made to their bank account information, which is kind of not the story you heard on the MyPayrollHR front. That is, you had MyPayrollHR obviously doing something with employee bank account information and no one knew it.
Yeah.
So there was no transparency on that side, whereas on our platform, there's full transparency. And anytime something triggers where any kind of changes are happening at the bank account level, every single time the customer is notified.
Well, I think that's everybody had that covered.
And the accounting professional gets notified as well. If you're working with a Gusto partner.
But the employee account number stuff, like everybody's handling those use cases. It's expected, right? It's expected an employee moves banks. It's maybe an employee got phished and they're contacting the HR department, and then somebody's manually changing the bank accounts and of the employee bank accounts. But that's not really what happened here. What happened here is the file of the source account got changed. The actual main where the real money was, that's the one that got redirected.
The money was diverted from the employer accounts instead of going to a settlement account, went to a MyPayroll HR account controlled by Michael Mann. Yeah. So how do you prevent that?
So from personal experience, I remember even before Gusto, I used to be a controller for a non-for-profit that did a lot of batch payments for payroll, right? And so the way we would run employee files is we would create just this batch file that gets submitted into the payroll company. Generally speaking, there's always a front-end software that you upload this batch file to that gets associated to the payment processor. Same thing at Gusto, where if there are any changes that happen to bank account information or batch files, the front end of that is Gusto. So in conjunction with changing anything, it always triggers something. So you can't go into the payment processor's end and manipulate data there. It's always front end software driven. So depending on whether or not the payroll company is as transparent as they should be versus want to be, that drives notification as far as who gets notified of the change. So, on our side, any changes that happen, whether it's singular changes or even batch changes, the employees get notified. The partner gets notified if they're working with a Gusto partner. The company gets notified because that front end activity is what's happening on the Gusto platform.
And does Gusto go through internal controls audits, security audits? How can they be reassured that the controls are in place, as you say?
Yeah, so great question. And you're kind of speaking to my heart here, right? So I used to be a former financial statement auditor, love this side of the business, just never sold it as a practice. So obviously Gusto's built to be a durable company, right, that serves small businesses, hopefully for many decades to come. I mean, even recently, we got our Series D financing from leading investors like Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, General Catalyst, and it goes through substantial due diligence process. And doing due diligence work prior to AdvisorFi at my old firm called Daskell Bolton, it's really, really heavy stuff. And so we look at financial statement integrity, financial health, burn rates, cash flow, the whole thing. So because we've gone through regular series or regular rounds of funding, we constantly go through those due diligence reviews by not only just one party or two parties, but by multiple parties. Because each of these investors have their own due diligence teams. So if we get investments from Fidelity, T. Rowe Price, and General Catalyst, that's 3 due diligence teams coming in and reviewing the same thing over and over and over again. So they're not utilizing each other's work papers. So
and now because of this use case, right? What's happened here, Cachet wasn't ready for this NatPay, or is it NatPay, Blake, or NatPay?
Yeah, NatPay was the other one.
They handled the tax deposits. They weren't aware of this possible fraudulent use case, and so now it's now all the payroll players are, and they're going to put in controls around this because ultimately it would be in somebody internally at a Gusto, right, or something doing like this. But now it's led, though, if you saw the article, the New York State Senate is considering putting regulations on the payroll industry, and my thing on that is I get what's going to motivate that, but I also think it would kill things. Imagine if there was high regulations around 8 to 10 years ago. Would we have a Gusto or a WagePoint or an OnPay, or even would Square be able to get in the payroll game? Mm-hmm. If we have this heavily regulated environment, from an innovation standpoint.
I mean, I think regulation is good. I don't think any payroll company should think this is a bad thing. And I know that New York has put forth those two pieces of legislation, which is legislation. I think that they're putting forward is a little more after the fact, because I think one of the bills basically just makes it or creates a criminal penalty for kind of any intentional misappropriating of like payroll and payroll tax funds, right? So that's one bill, and that's an after the fact thing. The other bill is basically making payroll processor companies responsible for paying up to 3 times the value of a paycheck if an employee misses a paycheck, right? That's an after the fact thing. So I know at Gusto we're as transparent as we can possibly be, not only to our partners, but also our customers, our Gusto customers. So I don't think regulation is bad in making sure that companies are very transparent when you have a tremendous amount of users and their employees very dependent on you as a resource, right? So we would welcome it. I would welcome it. I think it's a good thing.
To me, it's what is almost unimaginable in the payroll industry. So lawyers, right? If lawyers get that money from clients, they have to, that retainer, they have to put it in a trust account, and those trust accounts cannot be commingled with their business, their operating accounts for running their actual law firm practice. The trust accounts are completely separate. But apparently in the payroll industry, the deposits, this money that's moving back and forth, you can commingle that with your company finances.
Wow.
Like it does not have to be handled separately. Like there's no legal reason to handle it separately. And that seems insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would totally agree. I mean, I remember just even having these conversations with clients at AdvisorFi, right? Like people would ask me all the time, should I have a separate bank account for my company? Or is it okay for me to commingle my business funds with my personal funds, right? So it's the same argument, so, I mean, at Gusto, I mean, we have completely separated customer funds from its own corporate funds. Yeah. Right. So, and we include any money Gusto holds on behalf of customers for purposes of tax payments. So, like I said, a lot of the good habits and the good things that one should do as a business owner, we're already doing at Gusto. The question is there a law that forces you to do the good things, right? So we try to be as intentional as possible, but will there be legislation that mandates good business practices to happen?
And I think one of the security risks that this whole episode with MyPayrollHR exposes is the weakness of ACH as a system,
right?
And the risk associated with it. When you give somebody your account number and routing number to make direct deposits or to withdraw funds from your account, that could be misused, right? The company might screw up and take out too much money or do it twice as it happened with Cachet. And so I think one of the things that I've always done that I think everybody should do if it's not too expensive is just have a separate bank account that you use for ACH deposits and then move the money as soon as you receive it into another account and you don't give out that number. Mm-hmm. Right? And that way you're protected from somebody scamming the ACH system and tying up your money for potentially months, right? Because it can take months to resolve some of these issues with banks. Which is what part of the pain these employees are going through is that, there's been a hold on the funds that have been drawn out of their accounts, and they have to work with the banks to get that unfrozen. And that is they have up to 60 days to decide what to do. And you don't exactly have 60 days to pay your rent.
And it's a very low tech process. I talked to somebody who is involved in technical support recently for payroll. And so if something happened, an employee didn't get paid, you'd have to investigate, right? And so a lot of times it's because somebody mistyped an account number somewhere. And so essentially it would be the payroll company would be doing a control F and searching in a text file for this employee's name, social, bank account numbers. And then on the other side of the phone call would be the bank doing the same in their text file, trying to figure out where the typo is, right? And then get it fixed and then resolved going forward. But it's very, very low tech in the grand scheme of where we are in 2019.
So unless there's anything else you guys want to talk about with MyPayrollHR, I'd love to move on because there is other news that has happened.
There is.
And Will, I think you wanted to talk a little bit about WeWork, right?
Yeah. WeWork is notoriously known in the startup community, right? Like I cannot imagine a world at the moment without WeWork. Any startup knows about WeWork. It's such a great co-working space as a business owner to kind of get yourself into without committing to kind of like any real estate.
Like Starbucks.
Yeah, like Starbucks, right? So like WeWork has really become known as like connecting entrepreneurs and others who in the past would have worked from like home or like you said, David, a coffee shop. The company just kind of became known as bringing a new way of working to a changing world. Right. And so recently in the Wall Street Journal, or recently WeWork themselves have thought about going public and want to go public. And they've kind of built this, office rental giant at an amazing private valuation of like, I think $47 billion. But what has happened is obviously the founders' behaviors, while it worked, as a privately held company, has not worked in its initial public offering last month. So, the New York Times article made a really good case where WeWork themselves has just been besieged with criticism over its governance, right? So like even tying back to like good governance, does a company have good governance? And when others get involved, does that good governance just like break because they're not really performing good governance? So like their business model and like not only is there good governance or their governance being questioned, but like their business model, their ability to turn a profit. Now they're expecting like an IPO valuation as low as 1/3 of the original $47 billion sticker price. That was supposed to be.
And I think I saw their biggest investor, SoftBank, is also their biggest customer. It's like 10% of the revenue.
Well, having a revenue concentration is not a bad thing. It just needs to be disclosed on the financial statement. Now you're talking to an auditor, right? So like having concentration is not bad. It just needs to be disclosed because if you have a concentration of revenue and you lose that one client, it could materially impact.
But
impact the reader.
What'd you say again?
But the concentration of revenue is from the main investor.
Well, and potentially one that could help prop up IPO valuation, right? Because they've talked about putting in hundreds of millions of dollars into this IPO. And to me, like it shouldn't be necessary, right? If there's real value there for them to do that. And like the banks underwriting the IPO are the ones that are also invested in the company currently. And also a huge tenant, right? And then there's all the self-dealing with the founder. Is it Adam Newman is his name? I think. And he has all these loans and he has he owns buildings that WeWork is leasing. And that's been a big issue, right? Entangling that has been an issue. So
yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of related party activity going on there.
I think even his like wife had and I guess they're changing this, but she could designate his successor if something happened to him. Like that's a little bit unusual that like the board doesn't get to do it, that she gets to do it. Yeah.
Well, like I said, like in the land of private business, like almost anything is free range, right? And so like I think what's interesting about this case is realizing the long-term health of a business when you're not only staying as a private business, but if you're even considering about going public and getting other people involved and making sure that you're doing good business, right? Yeah. So things worked beforehand. Things are not working so much after the fact when investors and auditors and everybody else gets involved.
Now, I may not be a huge fan of the WeWork IPO and what's been happening here, but I'm a big fan of WeWork. I was a customer or a member, I should say, because they call them members. I was a member for 3-4 years when I had my own firm. I love using it. I love that you can travel around and then book conference rooms in the cities you're in. So I would go to New York and I needed to record a podcast episode. I just go to WeWork and book a conference room and do it. That's pretty awesome. But there's been a downside to all of this attention with the IPO is that it's drawing attention to other aspects of WeWork that may be a little problematic. Mm-hmm. And one of them, which I was aware of when I was a tenant there, is their Wi-Fi. And this is based on an article I spotted in CNET, and the title is WeWork's Weak Wi-Fi Security Leaves Sensitive Documents Exposed.
Interesting.
Apparently, if you're just a member and you're using their free Wi-Fi that comes with your membership, it's super high speed, it's great, but they deliberately do not, to keep it fast, they deliberately do not protect that Wi-Fi network. It's like you're using the Starbucks Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi at the airport. And a lot of people apparently don't realize this. And so a security researcher has been going around to all these WeWork offices in New York and finding many sensitive documents just exposed on the network, right? People who have shares on their computers, right? And these are companies that may be financial companies, and a lot of big businesses are using WeWork now. So what you need to know is if you're a tenant or you're thinking about being a WeWork tenant, is that you need to pay extra for a VLAN, a virtual local area network that then separates your company from everybody else in the WeWork building. So you're not sharing a network with them. That costs an additional $95 a month with a $250 setup fee. And a private office network costs $195 a month. I don't know the difference between those. I'm guessing different levels of security, but that can add to the cost of having an office at WeWork, which, the whole point is that it can be as low as a few $100s a month to have a membership there.
Yeah, the beauty of VPN, right? Like, talk about trying to protect your data on your computer when you're bouncing from Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi.
Yeah, and it slows things down, right? It's like that's the thing about VPN. I mean, you could use that with WeWork, just a VPN client on your computer, but then that slows down Zoom or any like video chat or gaming or whatever you're doing. So you got to pay extra. Just something to watch for. So David, what else do we want to talk about this week? I've got some stories about Intuit and TurboTax, tipping at the counter, right? All these like point of sales that now let you tip. Who tips, who doesn't? We can talk about broadband. 2
companies took some pretty big rounds. Practice Ignition.
Oh yeah, Practice Ignition raised like 15 million US?
Yeah, so Guy Pearson was on the podcast way back in our early days, like going back to October of 2018. So they took a $26 million raise to really ramp up their team. They want to ramp up to almost 200 employees and really make their global push now and add new features and more functionality. So it's just it's helping them make that next step. So it's a really good story because Guy was an accountant.
Yeah. I love this.
He started his own practice, an accounting practice, and now he has a well-funded SaaS-based startup.
I love it when accountants found companies to solve their own problems, right? Those always tend to be great companies.
Will, did you use Practice Ignition at your firm when you had your firm?
Actually, funny story there. I actually built a mini version of Practice Ignition before I knew Practice Ignition was PI.
You could have took it to market.
I could have took it to market, but I totally built it for my firm specifically because I in the beginning when I first started my practice, I didn't realize Practice Ignition was around. And I think at the time they were in Australia and they weren't really in the United States making a lot of noise or ground or just trying to get market share here in the States. So I built a solution that allows my prospective clients to select plans with me, to onboard plans with me, to capture their payment information securely through like Braintree and everything. So I built actually a mini onboarding solution. And I remember having a conversation long ago with Guy Pearson when I first ran into him. And he wanted to see what I had built. And at the time, I thought to myself, he just wants to see if I'm competing against him. But it was just genuine interest because he, in his mind, I think it validated what he was doing, right? And while I felt like I was slightly ahead of the curve by doing something like that and building like an onboarding solution, I didn't have the power that he did on his platform, right? I wasn't able to customize the plans; they were just kind of like pre-baked 1, 2, 3 kind of plans. I'm really excited for Guy. Guy has worked very hard on PI, and I think a Practice Ignition is such a great solution, not only for like accounting pros, but just anybody who's in the professional industry, right? Anybody who's thinking about selling plans, needing recurring engagement, wants to capture payment up front, scaling that whole onboarding pain point. PI is such a great solution for that. So kudos to Guy for like locking that in. I'm excited to see what they're going to do in the future.
And who else? Somebody else raised money, you said?
Yeah. Some gigantic company called Stripe.
Oh, yeah. We know them.
So Stripe took a $250 million round, bringing its total valuation to $35 billion.
Wow. Man, it's amazing. I wish I had a business where I could just take 2.9% of every transaction in the global economy. That would be great.
And Gusto's a unicorn now. There's Gusto a $2 billion valuation now, Will?
Yeah. No. So they received $200 million. And I think that puts our valuation up into, I
think you're a unicorn. I think Gusto's a unicorn. I'd be safe to, I don't know if you're a 2X unicorn, but I think Gusto's a unicorn. But if you think about that, this is like 35X. Right? Yeah. Of whatever Gusto's at.
Unicorn of unicorns.
It's very, very insane. Yeah, it's pretty insane. Yeah, and so they're now the most valuable private financial technology play that's out there.
There's no doubt Stripe is is a game changer out there. I mean, they've done some incredible stuff. I mean, some of the solutions that they've rolled out are pretty amazing. So that's what's kind of cool about being on the other side of the fence and not doing accounting full time anymore, but being on like the app side. And maybe Blake, you can speak into this. But it's interesting to see more closely just the passion of the industry and just pushing innovation forward as much as possible. And then the market responding with validation, right? And so like what Stripe has done is pretty incredible, and the market's validating their success.
Well, and what they did is they solved one problem really, really well. Because previously, if you're an app developer, or you wanted to, on your website, take somebody's credit card, you basically had to create the code yourself. Like, this field has to have 16 digits. This field only accepts dates. This field is for the 3-digit verification code.
Right.
Yeah. This is the name on the. You had to do all this work. What's the billing address? You had to do all this work yourself. And they basically developed it so you could just, as a developer, copy 9 lines of code and paste that into your app, and now you can take credit cards. And so, of course, every developer, if it was going to take you 3 weeks to build a credit card charge system, and you got a nice secure one in 10 seconds, you were going to do this. So they just solved one thing really, really, really well. And look what's happened because of that.
So, Will, I know that you've got to drop off now. David and I will continue. Just want to say thank you so much for joining us and offering your insight into this issue and the stories that we've talked about today.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you guys so much for just everything that you do. Believe it or not, here on partner side at Gusto, a lot of the partner advisors that work with the accounting partners out there, they're always constantly asking what are the podcasts to listen to? And obviously top of mind is Cloud Accounting Podcast. So much so that I think I'm actually going to work on a toolkit for our partner advisors of like all the top podcasts for them to listen to so that way they could stay up to speed.
If people want to connect with you online and learn more about what you're up to, Will, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, 2 places. Twitter first, so you can follow my handle at ZWilster, and you can just friend me on. I was going to say friend me on LinkedIn is more like connect with me on LinkedIn, right? So you can connect with me on LinkedIn /W Lopez Jr. I think is the actual landing page. Get in touch, follow me. I still do my quirky videos on YouTube. Still kind of do all of that. So still pretty involved out there.
Awesome. Thanks, Will.
All right. Thank you, guys.
This episode of the Cloud Accounting Podcast is sponsored by Rewind. For years, Rewind has been successfully backing up thousands of small businesses' data that is stored in cloud apps like Shopify, BigCommerce, and MailChimp, saving these small businesses from CSV import errors, employee mistakes, and app integrations that didn't go as planned. Rewind has also been backing up QuickBooks Online company data too. That's right, Cloud Accounting World. I did say backup QuickBooks Online company data. It only takes seconds to install what is essentially an insurance policy against major disaster, or just those small business owners that like to get, quote, creative in the accounting system. Rewind works automatically in the background, capturing all the changes to your QuickBooks Online in real time. If something does go wrong, Rewind is the only service that gives you 100% control of what you need to restore, be it one transaction, multiple transactions, or all the data. To learn even more about Rewind and access a special offer just for listeners of the Cloud Accounting Podcast, head over to cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/rewind. That is cloudaccountingpodcast.promo/REWIND.
All right, we're back and Will is gone, so now we can talk about him. But I don't have anything to say because Will's such a nice guy, and I think Gusto is really lucky to have him.
I honestly could say, like, I did not know Will. I only knew Will from his YouTube videos, and I was always like, what is this guy? Because he like would edit like crazy emojis that were on fire in his videos, and I was like, oh yeah, what is this guy doing? Does he have his real accounting firm? Like, it was a little bit confusing, and so I only knew him from that. But then I got to know meet him and got to know him pretty well at the accounting salon. He's totally legit. Really like him.
So continuing on, sort of related to what Will was talking about, or what we were talking about together about Stripe. Stripe's biggest competitor in the payment space is Square on the retail side, right? And everybody is familiar with those point of sale Square, the Square dongle, or the actual iPad screens, right? We all have purchased at this point. I think everybody has purchased something with one of those. Well, I spotted an article in the New York Times titled "Counter Service Tipping: Who Gives?" And the subtitle is "Those Customer-Facing Touchscreen Payment Systems in Restaurants Are Confounding Customers in the U.S. and Beyond." And I was so happy to read this article because I feel this way and I feel very passionate about it and I hate it. And this is the thing.
Confounding as in like confusing people?
Yes.
Okay.
So I love Square. I love their app. I love their hardware. I have implemented it. I have installed it for people. I think it's fantastic. But the one thing that I really, really, really dislike is now wherever I go, when I'm buying coffee, when I'm getting a sandwich at the counter, I'm constantly being asked to give a tip, 15, 20%, sometimes even 25%. And
and this is not just Square. This is like every one of these e-point of sale, iPad type terminals. When they swing it around for you to sign, there's 3 huge buttons there. And everybody's watching you. You got to pick one.
Everybody's watching you. And you know that the person behind the counter is going to see if you left a tip, right? And you know that the people behind you are going to see. And so then you have this, I have this every time I buy something, this moment of like frustration or anger that I'm being asked to tip because I don't know about you, David, but I firmly believe out of principle, I do not believe in regular counter tipping, meaning tipping when I am going to the counter and buying something. I understand having a jar for money and change and maybe occasionally giving a tip, or if I'm a regular, maybe leaving a tip. But like I've always believed that tipping should be reserved for table service, for waiters.
I've always thought when you go up to counters, right? It's how much of a pain of an ass am I being? Like maybe my order's complicated and I'm making a lot of and then hold this or do this, then maybe I'll tip. Like if I'm forcing more work to happen, I kind of want to make tip something. But
I agree with you on that. But it shouldn't be a regular thing, right? Like tipping a waiter is a regular thing to me, right? If you're a decent human being, you tip your waiter, and you really should be tipping them, closer to 20%. Right. That's what I understand as being kind of common practice here among my family in LA. I know everybody's different, right? And this is the problem with tipping. Ideally, actually, we would not tip at all, but that's a lost cause, right? That's like trying to argue against timesheets. It's just not going to.
There's plenty of other podcasts, like the Planet Money podcast, et cetera, that have deep dived on this no tipping stuff and the experiments around that.
Okay. Well, so now there's data. Researchers have collected data to find out who is tipping. Am I in the minority?
Because when you just put cash in the jar, there's no tracking.
You don't really know.
Now everybody's being tracked. Okay, this would be interesting because I would love to hear this data because I've not seen this article or heard anything.
So this article is based on data provided by Toast. It's a Boston-based company that provides point-of-sale platforms to thousands of restaurants and cafes around the country. This is 2019 tipping statistics they provided to this New York Times reporter. In cafes, 58.5% of customers left tips. And for fast casual restaurants, the kind where you go up to a counter and order and then the food is brought to your table, it was 46.5%. So close to half, but not half, but close to half of people at cafes and fast casual restaurants are tipping on those digital point of sale systems. And the average tip for both was around 17%. So half of people are tipping 17%, and the other half are like, no, like me. So this is a clear split here, right?
But I wonder if it's if it's higher than it was prior to the almost forced opt-in, right? Because before you would have to remember to do the tip, think about doing the tip, versus just being in front of you and just clicking and signing. Just you press the button and sign. So it's got fundamentally from a use case perspective, it has to be increased. The tipping has to be up overall.
And here's the thing, Clover, a Toast competitor, another point of sale system, they collected data for tipping at tens of thousands of American restaurants under the category fast food, which includes cafes and fast casual restaurants. In May 2019, customers paying with cards tipped 42% of the time that tipping was available to them. And so then if you add the customers that throw in cash into the jar, it's looking like we've got 50% tip rate, and a substantial tip, right? More than just dumping the change they give you into the jar, which is kind of what I always used to do. This is a lot. And of course, the business owners are very happy because this allows them to not raise wages, right? This is the weird thing about tipping is that when we tip, we are subsidizing. Theoretically, right, economics would tell us that we are helping business owners not pay a higher wage because we're making up for that. And so is that a good thing? And it's weird too that 50% of customers end up tipping and the other 50% don't. So some of us are paying lower prices just because we choose to, and some are paying more because they choose to. And what I don't like is the cognitive dissonance I feel. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but I definitely feel like this little pain in my, like right behind my eyes every time I see that. And I have to choose no tip because it makes me feel like a bad person. So I want to know like if it actually like causes discontent among the customers.
Well, it'd be more interesting just to get an email report of your tipping after the year and find out like, where I fit in. Maybe I'm over tipping, Yeah. Like I'd like to know where this all slides in because those scales too, if you ever know, sometimes it's 17, 19, 22. It's not 15, 17, 20. Like the scale, like, because they can make those numbers wherever they want. So
right.
This is an interesting, this data is very, very interesting.
Oh, and then the question is, what about rideshare car services, Uber and Lyft? Do you tip on Uber and Lyft on a regular basis, David?
Yes-ish. Like,
what does that mean?
Like, unless like I don't remember being in the car, then I don't tip. I'm like, I don't even remember that ride. No, I don't tip. But if I remember who it is, usually I tip.
So, Uber used to not offer tips. And I actually really like that. I thought that was a differentiator versus a taxi where you're like obligated to give a cash and a tip. Right. It's like, how much do I tip? And like a taxi driver never seemed to be happy no matter what. They always seemed like unhappy.
It was never enough.
Yeah. So Uber held off on tipping until 2017, but then they made it available, and it's available in the US and 48 other countries. So there's data now on tipping. So Lyft provided data. They couldn't provide data on the percentage of riders tipping, but they did say that their drivers make an average of $30.84 per hour, of which $2.27 per hour is tips. So that's well under 10% of their income. So while tipping is widespread, it's either in extremely low amounts or not yet the norm. And Uber wouldn't provide the data. So we don't know about the US, but we do know about Europe. So FreeNow, a European rideshare service that's a joint venture of Daimler and BMW, was formerly known as MyTaxi. They have data on tipping across Europe. So in Germany, 83% of riders tip. 83% in Germany, 53% tip in Britain, 48% in Poland, 46% in Italy, 39% in Spain, and 35% in Ireland. And how much people tip is lower than in the United States. Poland is on the top with an average of 12%. Yeah, I'm torn about that too, right? Like, should tipping for a ride service be regular? Should it not? What's normal? It's not like you can just like look this up. Like, things are changing so rapidly. It's not like there's a, what was that column that used to be in the newspaper where people ask etiquette tips? We don't have that anymore. So this is one of those things that I am just, I find
think this is a soapbox survey you should do for yourself on Twitter. Just finding out, how people what they feel about these automatic. They're not automatic tips, but they're kind of these social. Like, you're kind of being forced. You're not even forced. It's like opt in. Like you cannot. It's hard to opt out. Like, you're just forced to do it.
And here's what I don't like about this: is like, okay, I'm tipping at the counter for service. I'm tipping my rideshare driver. Like, as an accountant, I never ask for tips, but maybe I should. Like, maybe all of us should be asking for tips when we collect our invoices. Check here to give me an 18% tip on this service that I provided to you. Like, why shouldn't we do it if everybody can do it? Fair game, right?
Yeah.
So that's my rant, and the one thing that I don't like about these modern point of sale systems. We got more to talk about if we got some time here.
I have about selling your firm article.
Yeah, everybody wants to sell their firm.
So this article is in the Canadian Accountant. This is Canada's independent news source for the accounting profession. This is the number one factor for an accounting practitioners looking to sell. And the article touches on, everybody always talks about percentage of total billings. What's the going rate? What is your percentage of total billings? But she's kind of arguing that the most important one is client retention.
I don't know if you mentioned the author. It's Bridget Noonan.
My bad. Sorry. Yes.
No worries.
And
so what did she say is the most important factor?
So her argument is the most important factor is retention.
Retention.
What's the current retention rates of an accounting firm? Mm-hmm. Right? Are clients leaving? Right? And your ability to retain the clients once you buy the firm.
Absolutely.
Because they might not like you. Maybe it's not the right fit. And now you've lost those firms. So now you've completely overpaid for a firm. And so it's not what the current billing rate is. There's other numbers to look at.
I agree. Well, that's why it's really important to also have a clawback provision. If you're buying a firm, you want to ensure that the clients are with you for at least 4 or 5 years so that you can make back the profit that you would be paying out to the partner who's departing. And definitely always include something like that. You want to have at least 5 years. If they leave before then you get to reduce the price. And there's like a formula for that.
And then the other piece of that is episode 110. That really, there's a panel we did and we talked about selling your firm, and there's a lot of really important bullets in there if you guys want to jump in and listen to that episode.
So the last thing that I've got today is something that was sent to me by Jacob Oberlander, CPA. He was in a LinkedIn group and forwarded me this message. A CPA who is in a small, rural, and isolated community, and they still don't have high-speed internet. So he was asking the group, like, how do we embrace cloud accounting and all this stuff when we don't have reliable broadband internet? And it just reminded me that living in a big city like LA, where we have gigabit Ethernet, like I can get that in my building here, right? It's still a problem in a lot of the United States where there's not reliable high-speed internet. And I think that is going to be one of the big barriers to cloud adoption in this country. So thank you, Jacob, for pointing that out. And he also said that he was reminded of it in his own experience because he was traveling on the New York State Thruway to Canada, and there was a stretch of 80 miles that they didn't even have cell phone reception.
And that's true. And I've driven, from Tucson to San Diego or Tucson to LA. There's stretches in the Arizona desert here where you don't have cell phone reception.
The good news is, though, that the FCC is aware of this issue and has been working on subsidizing the expansion of broadband into rural areas. The FCC has authorized $121 million in funding to bring broadband service to 36,579, quote, unserved rural homes and businesses in 16 states, unquote, over the next decade. This recent announcement was in August, and it represents the fourth wave of support from the 2018 Connect America Fund Phase 2 auction. And the providers will receive funding this month. So subsidizing the expansion of broadband into rural areas. Approximately 17% of businesses are in rural parts of the country, despite the fact that 97% of the U.S. is classified as rural. So I think this is a great thing because just from an economic, political perspective, as we move toward a services-based online economy, if you don't have broadband internet, you're left out. The jobs are disappearing, like at your local hardware shop. And, how are you going to get a job as like an online bookkeeper or something, or whatever, if the best you have is like a slow, terrible DSL connection.
And what I've noticed too is, in my experience, is where there's nobody at and there's no economic activity, empty parts of the desert, there's no service. Some part of the forest, there's no service. But even like you went to, like, it's not so much big city technology based because you can go to across the entire Midwest where population densities are very low, and you can get very good cell phone service and internet service because all the farming equipment now is all online. It's between GPS maps and online, right. And the farming, and people are monitoring their farming equipment from their iPad sitting in a truck 2 miles away. So it's really where there's economic activity, that's where you're going to have internet access. And so then I'm kind of like, well, if there's no economic activity there, is there even somebody with the need for cloud accounting?
Well, yeah, there's businesses out there. I mean, and here's the thing is in California, it's well known, I think, that we have a housing crisis, right? There's a reason that half of the homeless population in the country is in California. I just read that stat recently, which is depressing. And a lot of those people are in LA and San Francisco. And the reason they're homeless is because it's a supply and demand mismatch, right? We have too many people and we haven't built enough housing. So unless we're going to build more housing, which doesn't seem like there's a political will to do that, people are going to have to leave and go elsewhere to find affordable housing. And actually, given that I can work in the cloud, I've talked about this with my family, is like, why don't we just go out somewhere more rural and, set up shop there? But then one of the constraints is a lot of these cities that are very appealing, they're out in the mountains that are beautiful, like don't have broadband, believe it or not. Or if they do, it's just not very fast. I mean, like we're talking, 1 megabit is the best you can do, and it costs a fortune. And I'm like, I can't operate on that. I need 100, I need 1,000, right? To do what we're doing right now, David, where you're broadcasting from Tucson and I'm here in LA, and these are high quality files that we're sharing back and forth, right? This is a must have. So it's actually, the lack of broadband has limited our choices.
We'll do a challenge here. Next time we go to Mexico, we'll, I'm on the road somewhere. We'll try to record something. See how it goes.
All right. Well, that's all I've got for this week. As always, you can reach me on LinkedIn. Please send me a message and let me know that you're a listener when you connect with me there. And on Twitter, at Blake T. Oliver. How about you, David?
You can find me on Twitter at David Leary. You can also find me on LinkedIn at David Leary. And you can find the Cloud Accounting Podcast as Cloud Accounting Podcast on all the socials. Please follow us. Please go to Podchaser, write a review on iTunes.
We will read it on the air.
And if you haven't, like if you tend to be one of the listeners that only listens to the news episodes and skips the interview episodes, definitely go listen to the episode we did with Cachet's lawyer,
Wendy Slavkin.
It's excellent, and it's almost shocking how much she tells us about the whole, like it's the only end-to-end full experience view of what happened.
Yeah, that was a really fun one. Well, David, until next week, have a great one.
Bye everybody.
Bye.